This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.
Hello, my name is Dr. Rob Page and welcome to Doc Talk. Doc Talk is a podcast that is produced by the Knoxville Academy of Medicine and features its physician members giving information to patients that are helpful in terms of making their healthcare decisions. And with that, I have with me today Dr. Dewey McWhirter. Dr. McWhirter is a specialist in sleep and he works with Tranquility Sleep Specialists.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me today.
And a topic that I love because I'm sure most people do because everybody loves to sleep.
Yeah, most people do.
But you're here to talk to us today about something that complicates the sleep, and that's sleep apnea.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, what is sleep apnea? I mean, is this patients who snore? Is this just patients who have trouble sleeping? What exactly is sleep apnea? What causes it, and what are the sort of symptoms of sleep apnea?
So really there's two general types of sleep apnea. There's either obstructive sleep apnea or what we call central sleep apnea. Usually what you're talking about when you're talking about sleep apnea is obstructive sleep apnea. When people have obstructive sleep apnea, at some place in their airway, the airway is actually collapsing. So they're trying to get air in. You have to think of your airway as a collapsible tube. And so when you try to get air in, sometimes it'll collapse on you. So that's typically what we would call obstructive sleep apnea. Central sleep apnea is a little different. It's where your brain just kind of at times doesn't try to breathe. And that's a more complicated thing to treat. But they both have consequences long term. They both make you more likely to have things like heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure, diabetes, heart arrhythmias, even dementia. All those things have been kind of associated with it over time. Typically, what you think of when you think of somebody who is having sleep apnea is they snore, and that's kind of the most common thing people think of. But that's not the only symptom. A lot of times people will snore, that people will see them stop breathing at night, they'll wake up gasping for air at night. Sometimes they're waking up with a dry mouth in the mornings, they'll breathe through their mouth a lot at night. It's not uncommon that they get sent to us because they develop some sort of complication related to sleep apnea, either high blood pressure or diabetes or heart arrhythmias, all those things. Heart failure patients can also have obstructive or central sleep apnea, so sometimes people get sent to us for that. So a lot of times we're seeing people just because they've already had consequences because of obstructive sleep apnea or central sleep apnea. Other times they're really coming to us because they're really tired during the day and their spouse is tired of them snoring, or they keep getting an elbow in their ribs at night saying roll over and that sort of thing. It's very common that the spouse is kind of the person who's like, you've got to get treated, that they've just had it with their sleep being ruined by the person snoring really loudly at night.
So now when you talk about sleep apnea, I think more about people who stop breathing when they're sleeping, but just snoring in and of itself, that can also be something that leads to these similar complications.
Well, so that's a interesting topic there. So when they've done studies before where they just looked at do people snore or not, you still have a little bit of increased risk even if you just snore and you don't have sleep apnea. But typically when we say you have sleep apnea, you're really having a lot of either complete stoppages or times where you just don't breathe deeply enough that you're able to get enough air in to either keep you asleep or enough air in to keep your oxygen levels up. I mean, typically what's happening is people are having a problem where as they are trying to breathe, they're having either this complete stoppage or they're having this smaller breaths with lots of snoring going on. And then they wake up or they have this big change in their oxygen levels. And either one of those things is going to lead to sort of trauma on your body, I would say. You get things like what's called cytokines flowing through your body and that sort of thing. And those cause your arteries to get smaller over time. They cause you to be more likely to have these heart arrhythmias by dropping your oxygen levels at night. So it's kind of this repeated trauma that's happening to your body over and over again.
So it's not good to deprive our bodies of oxygen because essentially by depriving it of oxygen, we're causing damage that's resulting in a lot of these secondary issues you're talking about, diabetes,
Correct.
Heart disease.
Yeah.
So essentially, now do you find that more patients are diagnosed with sleep apnea by their spouse or they're or that they're diagnosed, or that you just have a patient who says, "Look, I just don't sleep well at night. I'm tired all the time."
Right.
Or is it sort of an equal mixture thereof?
It's probably a little bit more of the spouse being the one who says, you're going to get a sleep study. I'm tired of this. I can't stand the snoring, and I'm really worried about you because I sit there and watch you at night and go, is he going to take another breath or not? And so that's usually most of the cases we see is that's how they got there. But you also see patients who come in who just go, I'm exhausted. I don't know what's going on. I'm asleep for 8 hours, but then I'm exhausted when I wake up.
Gotcha.
And,
so I'm a patient who I'm not sure if I have sleep apnea or not. And my spouse is, well, they just say, well, you snore really loudly, and that's about, then maybe they're a heavier sleeper, fortunately for them. And so what sort of, so I come to your office. Now, generally, do you take patients primarily? You take them by referral, or how do you generally see patients? Can a patient just make an appointment to come see you?
They can just make an appointment to come see us. I'd say most of the patients we see aren't ones who just made an appointment on their own. Mostly they're referred by their primary care physician or cardiology or pulmonology.
Gotcha.
These other specialists will send them to us because they're having one of these issues.
Gotcha.
But we do see a good number of patients who basically just call in because they're...
So intrinsically, if this is something I can address with my primary care physician, or maybe another physician who's taking my care, and I can talk to them about maybe the possibility that this could be something.
Right.
So let's say I've been referred to your office, or I come in your office. What sort of testing do you do to be able to determine if this is something that I have? Is this something that can be easily done in an appointment with you, or how does your office work, and how do you generally start seeing a patient, and what sort of procedures do you do?
Right. So typically what happens, you come in and we'll take a look at the patient's airway and see what it looks like. That gives us an idea. We also get a complete history and physical from them to see what the story is, see if they're having symptoms that suggest sleep apnea. We also will listen to their heart and lungs. Sometimes that gives us an idea of what's going on, especially since these diseases of obstructive and central sleep apnea are associated with other disorders like heart disease. Once we have the history and physical, if it looks like they probably do have sleep apnea, then you typically come in for an overnight sleep study. So typically, most of the time, people do come in and sleep in a sleep lab. They have things hooked up to their head to monitor their brain waves. There's things that go under your eyes to monitor your eye movements during the night. That helps us to figure out what stage of sleep the patient is in during the night. There's deep sleep, light sleep, and there's dream sleep. So we kind of need some information on which stages of sleep they're in at night. There's also things that go on your finger to monitor your oxygen levels at night. There are some straps that go around your chest and your abdomen to monitor your body's actual effort to breathe at night. There's something that goes under your nose to see if your airway is if air is actually moving in and out of your airway. So that's typically what we do. I also brought what's called an ambulatory device.
Oh, neat.
So these are basically devices that people can use at home, and it has one sensor that basically is sensing your air movement there at night. There's another one on here.
So it's like a little nasal cannula.
A little nasal cannula, yeah.
That actually goes in sort of under our nose, like similar to what we get when we get supplemental oxygen.
Correct.
But it's actually, as opposed to giving us air, it's measuring the air coming in and out.
It's measuring changes in the air pressure, basically, as you inhale and exhale. And then there's another belt that's basically an effort belt that measures your body's actual effort to breathe at night there. And then there's the oximeter, I'll get this up here, that monitors your oxygen levels at night.
And that just goes on your finger?
That just goes on the finger there, yeah. And these are great for certain patients, but it's kind of been a little overdone in the last couple of years. There's been this idea that everybody can get a ambulatory study or a home sleep test like that. And unfortunately, if you have heart disease, if you have lung disease, if you have other health problems, a lot of these health problems make it so you can't really use those devices.
Gotcha. So and you mentioned being strapped in like that. That would be some situation in which I would be concerned. I mean, I'm a very heavy sleeper, so I don't. I mean, I could be upside down, and you could be dangling me over a bucket of honey or something, and I wouldn't wake up. But is this something that generally patients have trouble? If they have trouble sleeping, or if they have, if they think they have sleep apnea, do they have trouble when they come into your office to be able to sleep, to have these studies done?
Sometimes they do, yeah. And we try to gauge that when they come in for a visit to see, do they need a sleep aid to help them sleep that night of the study? Because some people, get in there and they just have a horrible time sleeping. I can tell you the first time when I was in med school and I saw somebody get hooked up with all this stuff, I said, are they really gonna be able to sleep like that?
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, that's what I thought the first time I saw it too. And most people do end up sleeping because you got to think about it. A lot of these patients are people who are exhausted because they just haven't had a good night's sleep in forever. So even with all that stuff on them, they'll fall asleep.
So, and there is, just as you mentioned, there is an alternative for those patients who do not have, other complications, who don't have lung disease, who don't have heart disease.
Right.
I could actually take that home with me, and I don't have to worry about being in the office and worried about all the other things, that I can have the same sort of monitoring done at home.
Right. Yeah. And it's not as complete of a monitoring device. And the other problem is that if something comes off during the night, there's nobody there to notice it or anything like that. So it's, they're okay.
So ideally we do it in your office, but there's also potential, just in case, for those small few, there would be other alternatives available to us. So let's say that I'm a patient, I've come into your office, I've had the sleep study done, and you come to me and you say, you have terrible sleep apnea. We need to do something about it. So what do we do?
So typically, most of the time what we try first is what we call CPAP, or continuous positive airway pressure. It involves a device like this. This is a CPAP machine, a continuous positive airway pressure machine. And basically this will sit next to your bed, and there's a hose that goes into the back of it, and it goes to a mask. And basically this mask can be either something under your nose or around your nose, or sometimes it's around your nose and your mouth. And the machine is blowing in air, and the machine is holding the airway up with that air. If you think of it as a collapsible tube, if you're blowing in pressure from the top, as there's negative pressure at the bottom, you're going to make it so it's harder for that airway to collapse on you at night there.
So essentially like blowing into a balloon. That essentially you're keeping, that by continuously blowing into that balloon, you're keeping it open.
Correct.
As opposed to, so you have air constantly flowing in. Now, is this something that's generally uncomfortable to patients, or?
It definitely takes getting used to. I mean, a lot of patients have come into our office and they've not had anything on their face while they're sleeping for 70 years. So it's going to take a little bit of getting used to.
Gotcha.
And that's what we try to help people with. There's a lot of different things that have come out over the years to try to make it easier for people. I brought some of the newer masks.
Oh, yeah.
So it used to be that all of them were made out of latex. They quit making a lot of them out of latex. I'm talking about the cushion part that touches your face. They usually do have some sort of hard plastic part to them. But this is one that's a newer innovation that actually has a memory foam instead of just silicone, because some people really don't like having that silicone on their face. So there's been developments like that. Some of the other newer ones that people really like are these smaller masks that go underneath your nose. So nasal pillows are ones that we talk about that have these little prongs usually that go in your nose. Well, this is kind of a different version of that instead just has this hole that goes underneath your nose. Wow. And so it's snug up against your nose and you're breathing through that hole. And it's got a tube on either side that goes to a swivel on the top of your head. And some people like that because this makes it so that the hose isn't like bumping into your head or anything.
Your face,
and that, unfortunately, some people do really need to have the ability to breathe through their mouth and their nose at night. So the typical mask you think of that we call a full face mask is usually one that goes over the bridge of your nose, but they've also developed ones that are similar to this that, again, have that hole underneath your nose, but also go around your mouth so you can breathe through your mouth at night too.
Gotcha.
So there's been a lot of innovations to try to make these things
those look a lot more comfortable than some of the ones that I've seen, because this is something that's developed sort of, during your career and during my career, that this is not something that really was ever addressed. We knew patients snored, and then we determined that it was something that was really helpful for them to have this. And the original masks were ungodly. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, trying to sleep with something that on my face, and I think that was very unwieldy. And what you're showing us here today is that it's not. If you've tried in the past, or maybe this is something you've seen a physician about in the past. Things have really changed a lot to make things a lot more comfortable, to make it a lot more available to patients. If they have trouble sleeping, or if they have, if they don't like having things on their face, that there really are a lot of great alternatives for them. Yeah. So asking strictly from a patient perspective about insurance, the sleep studies, is this something that insurance generally covers? Yeah,
insurance usually covers the sleep studies. They almost all cover the ambulatory studies or the home sleep tests. Some of them don't, but most of them do. It's usually a little bit of a, have to do prior authorization things like that. But it's
jumping through hoops, but generally something that's covered. And similarly, would the CPAP Is that something that's covered as well by insurance?
Yes, typically CPAP is also covered by insurance. It's since it's kind of the main treatment for sleep apnea out there these days, that's usually covered.
That's excellent. So well, you've given us great information about how we can be diagnosed with sleep apnea and ways it can be treated. If I'm a patient and am interested in being referred to your office by my physician, or if I'm interested to come see you, how do I get in touch with you, Dr. McWhorter?
So you can either call our offices, which are the Genova Sleep Centers, actually, or you can find all the different resources for our company at tranquilitysleep.com, and it has information about all the locations where we work, and you can actually make an appointment on the website.
So you have multiple locations for patients who may not be in the Knoxville area?
We really have locations that are in the Knoxville area.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
But different areas of town.
Correct.
So not
Yeah.
necessarily so mainly in the Knoxville area.
Yeah.
And of course, you're thinking as a patient, this is something where you come in and you have the study done, and then you come in and maybe if you get diagnosed, you get the CPAP. You're not necessarily coming back and forth to Knoxville a lot, or this would be something where you could.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, you do have to have some follow up afterwards to see how you're doing with it. But what happens eventually is usually you're just coming once a year, so we can kind of see how you're doing with the machine and everything.
Most excellent. So, well, you've given us some incredible hope, mainly for spouses, I think. And I know my wife's going to see this and immediately say, "Why didn't you grab one of those masks and take it home with you?" But I'm going to hold off as long as But then again, I don't even know why I would hold off, because I mean it strikes me as though this is something that would be I could avoid all kinds of problems if I get diagnosed early.
Yeah.
Basically stop putting my body in oxygen debt.
Right.
Not causing damage to myself, and basically just biting the bullet and coming in and having a study done and then getting treatment done.
Yeah.
So, well, Dr. McWhorter, thank you so much for joining me here today. And with that brings this episode of Doc Talk to a close. Doc Talk is a podcast that is produced by the Knoxville Academy of Medicine and features its physician members giving information to patients that are helpful for them in making their healthcare decisions. I'm Dr. Rob Page, and thank you for joining us.
This episode of Doc Talk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.